My name is Alistair. As margins get ever tighter and budgets continue to be squeezed, we need to find better and faster ways to get better and faster returns on our investments and on the projects that we are working on. Now, Agile delivers all of these things, but what we have noticed over the last few years is that there is often a missing ingredient, and that missing ingredient is great leadership. Now, it's natural to ask, if Agile teams are supposed to be collaborating, cross-functional, self-organising and autonomous, then what would the role of a leader be? Or what is the role of leadership? Actually, leadership is critical to getting Agile to work properly. It is a fundamental role that exists within the Agile frameworks. And that's something that we want to talk about a little bit today. What we're going to want to cover is the mindset, the leadership roles, styles, the membership and personalities, the team membership and the personalities, a little bit about the neuroscience of problem solving and innovation, and also how we handle our mistakes. Now, as you will see, all of these items sit on a continuum. And what we're looking for is to find that sweet spot here in the middle as we go through. We think that if we can hit that sweet spot, then we can actually do great things with our organizations. So firstly, let's just unpack a little bit what we mean by all of this. So an Agile mindset, what do we mean by that? Well, really the opposite of an Agile mindset is a bureaucratic or a fixed mindset. We've got some information on our website, coreypartnership.com. There's a page there which talks a little bit more about the Agile mindset and what that means. A lot of people, a lot of organizations, many that we have worked with, have successfully moved their frameworks, or some of their frameworks, from the waterfall plan-driven approach to an agile, iterative, incremental approach to doing mostly projects, in particular software projects. And in doing so, what has happened is that the team members who are working on those have moved through coaching, some of them naturally, from extrinsic motivation, which is where I do what I'm told, to a motivation which is determined by autonomy, mastery and purpose, where they are taking ownership of the projects and of what they're doing. And where this has happened, we have seen the benefits, these are some of them, we have seen the benefits of an agile mindset. Now, in my experience, as we do these and as we introduce these ideas, they normally tend to last roughly about 8 or 9 months before things start to stop working again. And that's when normally people come in and say, well, Agile didn't work. Actually, what we can do is we need to support Agile with the correct type of leadership. So if we just have the Agile frameworks and team membership moving, we will have Agile down at the levels where we're delivering projects. But if we want enterprise Agile, if we want our entire organization to move, then we need to support our leaders and help them to move from here to here. How do we get here in the first place? Well, in 1911, a guy by the name of Frederick Taylor introduced the concept of scientific management. And this was a way of controlling the output of the people who were working on the factory floor to make sure that they were as efficient as possible. And this was a time when we didn't need to worry about what they thought or how they felt. Today, of course, we hire people for their brains, and so we need to be aware of what it is that they're thinking and how they're feeling in order for them to do all the problem solving that we require of them. In the 1950s, a gentleman by the name of McGregor, who worked for MIT, he introduced the idea of Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X was this command and control idea, and Theory Y was the idea that actually we as leaders provide the vision, we explain the what and the why, and then we allow the people in our organizations to figure out the how and to deliver what it is that we want. And what's happened is that over the last few years, many organizations pay lip service to that theory, but actually they're stuck over here. And what I think we need to do now is we need to move on purpose over to that side of the quadrant. If we talk about a silver bullet, which everyone is always looking for, obviously, There is no such thing. Certainly, the frameworks we have discovered over the last 20 years are not a silver bullet in and of themselves. But the closest thing that you will ever get to a silver bullet is actually operating in this quadrant here with a truly agile mindset where the frameworks and the attitudes are working together. So how can we get there? Well, what is the quickest way to get there? For some of us, all we need is an explanation, and that will be enough. Some of us, we may need some evidence as well in order to be able to move to that place. Also, very easy to do. A lot of the time, one of the best ways is through modeling. So start small. Agile always says this: start small. Pick a team, pick a project, experiment and see what happens, and make sure that we're learning everything that we need to learn from that. And then after that, make sure that we are in a coaching environment where we can actually support those organizations. So we as leaders can jump into this at any point. My preference is here because that really encompasses the other quadrants quite nicely. So I suppose there are three things that we would encourage leaders to do differently. The first one is around providing context and clarity around the vision that we the leaders are passing on to the people in an organization. The reason we want to do that is that if we only delegate tasks without context, when they are faced with a problem, when they're faced with a decision, when they're faced with a choice, they won't necessarily know what option to take without coming back to us as leaders. That, of course, is incredibly inefficient and ineffective and costly, both from a time perspective and a money perspective. If they have clarity and context on the vision, they will then know most of the time which decision to make. The second thing that we would look to be doing differently as leaders is to make sure that we have a golden thread which connects us to every single person in the organization. That way, as ideas and solutions come up that need to be passed on to other parts of the organization, we can do that, and we're in a position to facilitate that. And then the third thing is that we as leaders ought to be thinking about really modeling the environment that we want. The way we treat all of the people in our organization will really drive how they treat each other, and it's important that we know how to do that. Why do we want to do all of this? The fact is that there's never enough time, never enough money, or never enough resources to achieve all the things we want to achieve as an organization in the daily tasks, let alone when we have new things thrown on top of us. Beginning of the year, most of us had really sensible plans for 2020, and all of that went right out of the window as we found out about coronavirus and COVID and everything else, and all that happened. We had to change, we had to adapt, we had to do things differently. Talking about the plans, the truth is, as we have found out, is that no plan survives contact with the enemy. The army have taught us this very well. So we need to be able to adapt and to change, and therefore we need all the brains in our organization to work with us on that. We humans, we are problem-solving machines. That's what we do, and we are pretty amazing at doing that. We now know through neuroscience and through other things exactly where ideas come from and how they come about. We know that 60% of ideas and innovations are sparks which come from the subconscious mind, not the conscious mind. And so we need to be able to identify, to work with that. And actually, there are ways of putting things in place which allow that to be on demand, so that we can actually have ideas and inspirations on demand. The other thing is that we never know where the ideas are going to come from. So the best idea could be absolutely anywhere in our organization. And most likely, the best ideas sit at the coalface, in the brains of the people who are dealing with the problem on a daily basis. What we need to try and do is get out of this idea that we as the leaders are the master problem solvers. Actually, these guys are the master problem solvers. They'll figure out ways around pretty much anything. We provide the environment to allow them to do that. So whereas we are amazing at doing this, there is a problem, there is a catch. And the catch is this thing known as the amygdala. It's part of the limbic system. It's basically, we've inherited it, it's part of our DNA, it's the way we've been built to protect ourselves from things. And that is the threat radar. When that gets triggered, our brains shut down. So for example, when we're experiencing a hijack, we're unable to focus, remember, learn or innovate, all the things that we really want to do. So as a leader, you call somebody into your office to have a discussion about something, the chances are that as they come in, they're worried that they've done something and that might be the end of their time with the company. That's just how we are naturally evolved. So what we need to do is figure out ways to understand what it is that we're doing to each other inadvertently, and figure out ways then to change all of those so that the brains are free to do everything that they need to do. Now, we're not in a place necessarily, most organizations now, as I say, we have learnt enough about emotional intelligence that we're probably not in a pure toxic environment. But there are still some vestiges of that around, normally sort of sitting in individuals. I believe that what we can actually do is we can actually untangle this from the bottom up and identify the people and support them, and as a leader provide that umbrella to protect the people underneath us if there is any situations like that. And then eventually what we do is we create, and we're going to touch this in more detail, is create a space where we have emotion intelligent, enabling servant leadership, so healthy leadership, which is doing the right thing. So our focus needs to be on the vision, the context and the strategy, simplifying things, putting the right people in the right places, and removing impediments. And then making sure that there is a space where people are able to collaborate and innovate, problem solve and do all those things. That really is our role. A lot of people ask, obviously, well, what about governance? What about risk? What about all those things? And we have a video called The Art of Governance in the Age of Agile, which goes into some detail to cover all of that. And what we're really talking about is creating leaders at all the levels. I mean, imagine an organization where every person thought of themselves as the leader and actually were able to make decisions and do the things that they needed to do to support the organization. So what we're talking about here is move the decision making to the information rather than try and drag the information up to the decision maker. So let's look a little bit then at the personalities that are optimal for an agile teams. McKinsey put this together. They did this research, and what they found was that there was a sixth personality trait, which is this idea of being able to handle ambiguity. Now, and isn't that where leaders really excel? That ability to basically provide comfort and safety for the people in an organization who maybe are not sure what is going on and what is doing. Think of it as we are sailing a boat, and we want to head across the Atlantic. We know that we want to go from A to B, but we know that we're never going to get there in a straight line. In fact, most of the time we're going to be off course. It's the leader's job to provide that psychological safety to make sure that everybody knows and everybody is comfortable with the fact that we're off course, because we know what the end destination is and we know how to get there. It's also important for us as leaders to understand these personalities so that we can adjust our leadership style as appropriate as we are dealing with different individuals or different parts of the organization. So what are those styles then? There are many lists with many different terms on them. And the reason I've picked this particular slide is because it comes from the Army Leadership Code, the British Army Leadership Code. And they, in fact, talk exactly about this. They present their leaders with this continuum, and they expect their people to be over here on the transformational side. Now, traditionally, we think of army and military and so forth as being over here, command and control. Actually, they're not. They want to be over here. They also talk about the fact that a good leader is able to move fairly seamlessly between 2, 3, or even 4 different leadership styles to accommodate what they're faced with. What they specifically talk about, they have this concept of mission command. And that is where the leaders provide the overall mission, the vision, what we want to achieve, and they let the soldiers on the ground actually work out how to do that and actually go about delivering it, because they're the ones that are going to come into contact with things that could not have been anticipated and are probably not known by the people who are not on the front line. So what they're looking to do then is to give control and give the decision making to the people in the organization, not hold that for themselves as leaders. What do we need in place to allow us to do that? Well, we need a couple of things. The first thing, we need competence. We need to know that our teams are able to do the things that we ask them to do. Also, we need to provide clarity and context on the vision. If we don't provide clarity and context, when they're faced with something new that happens, they will not be able to make a decision unless they understand clearly why it is that they want to do something. So if we provide clarity and we don't provide competence, very enthusiastic people unable to do anything. If we do it the other way around, and we have highly skilled people with no real direction, we have very expensive people sitting on our payroll doing nothing. We need to find that sweet spot, as Dave Marquet talks about in his book. We need to find that sweet spot that allows us to deliver both. Now, in his book, he talks about moving moving competence and clarity down here and moving the control here, and he explains what you do and when you can release control. If your competence and your clarity is high, but you don't release enough control, then you have frustration. If you do it the other way around and you give control when they are unable to do things or they're not sure about things, you have chaos. Again, he talks about, let's find that sweet spot where you have both. Now, when we do this, the chances are, because we're all human, there are going to be mistakes. Mistakes will happen. How do we handle that? My wife and I had the absolute privilege of sitting with 4 former Red Arrows pilots after they had just finished an acrobatics display, and we were able to attend their debrief. And something amazing happened. They sat down around the table, and the first thing that they did was they started to talk about all the mistakes that they had made. They each one talked about their own mistakes. And what they did, they were out of view, or they were in the wrong position, etc. And that just had an incredible impact, because when they then went into problem-solving mode, where everybody together was figuring out how to solve the problem so that wouldn't happen again. And immediately, Sue and I thought, wow, wouldn't that be incredible if that was happening in every boardroom across the world? We then, probably about 3 weeks later, we met a couple of people who were airline pilots for one of the big national airlines. And we were talking about this because we were sort of curious, and they said, we do exactly the same thing. In fact, there's a book called The Naked Pilot, where it talks about how the entire attitude and the culture in the cockpit has changed from command and control, where the captain is always right and no one ever questions them, to a place where actually they're a team, and that has reduced significantly the number of air accidents that have happened. So we need to understand how we own our mistakes. Do we punish them, or do we collaborate and work on them? At the end of every flight, there is a debrief. You say everything that you could have done wrong. I almost flipped such and such a switch which would have done X, Y, Z. So the entire organization works out then how to stop that from happening in the future, and everybody is safer for it. So where to start? We've covered a number of things and touched on various elements. The thing is, it doesn't really matter where we start. What will happen is that there will be a domino effect by starting anywhere in this circle on the other aspects of this. The key is to start small, experiment, try things out, and then iterate. If you would like us to work with you, us, the Corrie Partnership, to work with you, let's just tell you a little bit about sort of how we could be engaged. It may be that all you need is a conversation. Maybe we just need to discuss a few things, explain a few things, and that will be enough to get you started on your journey. Maybe we want to come in for a few days and actually meet various people in the organization, across the organization, identify maybe where there are some gaps, identify those people who are actually already doing this in the right way, and show you how they can actually be used to model for the rest of the organization. Maybe what we can do is come in for a little bit longer, maybe a few weeks, and that's where we would actually work with you on a project. Take a small team, take a small project and work on that and model that entire process for you. maybe what we can do is come in and help with coaching. So we can start anywhere in here. And again, let's start small, let's iterate, let's see how we can help and what we're doing. Let's make sure that we are realizing value early. And then what we suggest you do is release your budget in increments as we go along. Hopefully this makes some sense. Hopefully there's been some ideas here that can help you. If you would like to find out more, you'd like to discuss this further, we'd really look forward to talking to you. Bye for now.